Welcome, everybody, to the monthly webinar. It is July. We're back. We took a little break in June, but we're back with another webinar. Very excited about our webinar today and our guest. It is staying productive and sane during the busy season, which I think, depending on what business you're in, it all could be the busy season, but definitely now, especially in the trades, busy season. So how do we stay productive, stay on track, stay sane? And I'm super excited to somebody that I have an interesting connection with. We just found out about location, but I
That's
want to
right.
welcome in Tom Peregrino. He is the president of Service Nation. But aside from that, Tom has over 25 years experience in the home service industry. He began his career in sales in the mid 90s. He later became the owner operator of his own company, Daffin Cooling and Heating in Granbury, Texas. There's our connection, and I'll talk about that in a second. In 2021, he sold his company and joined Service Nation to create Alliance Premier, which is a large-scale coaching and training platform. And so Tom's been on an advisory board mentor for Service Nation for several years, and recently was promoted to president of Service Nation. So Tom, welcome. How are you?
I'm great. Even better to be hanging out with you, John, man. Thanks for the opportunity. Hopefully we can give the home service contractors out there some good nuggets, some good takeaways.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get going, I want to let everybody know we're going to let some folks, give them a minute to join in here. First things first, there is the chat. Make sure that when you are chatting, that you have it on the to everyone. If you want it to go to everyone, if you just want it to go to Tom and myself, make sure it's to host and panelists. But yeah, make sure when you're clicking chat to click on everyone and go ahead and tell us where you're coming in from, location, city, state, country. It's always fun to see where people are joining us from. And secondly, I want to let everybody know that aside from hosting our monthly webinar here at CompanyCam, I'm also the co-host of our new podcast called the Good Contractor Podcast. Myself, CompanyCam CEO Luke Hansen, and I host. You can find that on YouTube. Just look up Good Contractor Podcast or anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, etc. So that's the Good Contractor Podcast. If you want to listen to my voice a little bit more, that's a good way to do it. But more importantly, we get on there and really tell stories about um, how people got into contracting. It's not a here's why you should use CompanyCam by any means. It's more telling the stories about people like Tom, how they started their career, what got them into it in the first place, the stories, what they've learned along the way. It's been a lot of fun to do. So I encourage everyone to check it out, the Good Contractor Podcast. But it looks like we have some people joining in. We have
Awesome.
people joining in from Seminole, Florida, Naples, Florida, Brandon, Mississippi. Very cool. JGL Roofing and Exteriors, Falls Church, Virginia. Lincoln, Nebraska, St. Simons Island, Georgia, Warren, Michigan. Very cool. Coming in from everywhere. Spokane,
Spokane, New
New
Orleans.
Orleans. Yeah. Lubbock, Texas, Houston, Texas. Cool connection. I found out that Tom, by the way, speaking of Texas, my parents have lived in Granbury for 25 years or so. Uh, Tom's business was in Granbury, so he moved out there, he said, just a few years earlier than that. So when I saw that he was in Granbury, I'm like, I was just there for the 4th of July. So small world.
Small world.
Every year I go down and get a Stumpy's t-shirt because I love Stumpy's. So
Great burgers
uh,
there.
great burgers. Yeah, excellent. So wow, look at this. Hilton Head, Space Coast, Florida, Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, Minnesota. Very, very cool. Well, let's dive in. It seems like people are here. Um, I kind of gave a brief summary of how Tom got to this point, and obviously president of Service Nation. So let's dive into the things that I know people want to know about Tom, and that is when things get hectic, and maybe I don't care what business you're running, it could be any business, but when things tend to get hectic, bad habits can creep in. Maybe you cut a corner because you're just frantically trying to get everything done. Let's start here. If you were giving advice on holding yourself and your team maybe accountable to those standards that you set in the non-busy season, like, hey, we want to make sure we do this, and this. Um, what are some things either you tell me about a time where this exactly happened to you, or what advice could you offer those in the service industry and the trades on avoiding the bad habits when things get a little bit hectic?
Sure. Yeah, be happy to. Yeah. So for you guys out there that are listening and joining us, I'm a contractor at heart, and so I'm just a straight shooter. So I don't like to sugarcoat So to answer your question, John, you know, for years, I tried building my HVAC business by myself with limited coaching and mentoring. And
Mm,
then over the years, I figured out, man, I don't want, it's too hard to do it by myself. You know,
yeah.
yeah, I can scrounge, I can scratch and claw to get information from social media, to get information online, stalk my competitors. But circling back to answer your question, what I would really want to encourage every home service contractor on this call is get themselves a mentor. Ideally, you could start with a coach, and if it's a really, really good coach, a lot of times, they'll transition to being your mentor. But for goodness sakes, don't do what I did for years, which is try to build your business by yourself. You got to have a coach. You got to have a coach. In some respects, if I draw an analogy to trying to transform your body in the gym,
Mm,
yeah, you can join the gym and on your own with your own as much discipline as you possibly can, you can keep showing up. But like you're saying, John, sooner or later, you're either going to get distracted or you may
mhm,
get burnt out
yeah.
or you may just not want to wake up. You're just like, man, I don't want to get out of bed. And that's where a mentor slash coach is going to be right there in your corner to kick your butt, hold you accountable.
Yes.
Because goodness sakes, John, there's tons of information that's out there. There's
Yeah.
every system and process is already out there. You can download them from who knows whose website. You can listen to all these uh, guys on social media. But
Mhm,
where the rubber meets the road is actually doing the stuff,
mhm.
implementation. And after the implementation, you got to hold your team accountable or hold yourself accountable to whatever you implemented.
Right.
And
Yeah.
trying to generate all that discipline on a consistent basis by yourself is hard as hell. And that's why if you got a coach, if you got a mentor, that makes a huge difference. And they're out there. They're out there in your industry, whether it's solar or it's cleaning or you name it. There's
Mhm,
coaches out there. They
mhm.
are, you know.
Yeah.
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 So I'll get off my soapbox just for a second. That kind of was that a good starter for you?
That's a great starter. Do do you think I just to break off on that for a second, one of the things I think maybe a mentor is super helpful with is to look at it from an outside perspective. Because I think one of the reasons maybe the bad habits tend to form is the blinders are on, right? It's like I've got to get this done. I've got to get this done. I don't care how I get it done type thing. And you're not thinking about, wait a minute, when we were in the slow season, we our standards were this, and this, and we wanted to make sure we held it. We can't just walk away from that because it gets busy. I'm assuming one of the benefits of the mentor is that they can take a look away from the chaos of the busyness and go, lay it out for me. Give me a 30,000 foot view of what you're doing, what your issues are in your business. Even just that outside larger perspective, I assume, is a massive benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. Here at Service Nation, I mean, part of what we do is coach hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of contractors. And to your point, what we're able to bring to the table is we're not emotional about their business like
Hmm.
the owner is.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Mm-hmm.
no, 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 no. A good mentor is not married to your business. They've been where you've been. They've made all the mistakes that you may be getting ready to make, and they
Mm-hmm.
basically can say, "Hey, listen, listen, listen. Stop. You may be thinking some crazy thoughts. You may be getting really excited about something that's going to end up costing you a bunch of money." And
Mm-hmm.
so a good mentor is basically going to slap you upside the head if you're not seeing for the forest for the trees because they've already been where you're at. They're like, come
Sure.
on, all right, let's get back on track, or they may pop you out of a rut, and that's really important for a mentor to do. Sometimes you don't realize that you've been in a rut for a while.
Sure.
It could be a department that's been in a rut for a while. Could be a way that you had a case of stinking thinking for too long that you need to get popped out of that rut. Uh, I was talking to one of our members doing some coaching for them as an example, and they were getting all excited about spending a ton of money on a bigger warehouse, a bigger building. And where they are on their journey, it was way too soon. It was going to shackle them with debt, and the ROI that they thought they would get from it, not yet. They're not ready for that. They're not ready for that. And so, fortunately, because it's not our business, we were able to, I was able to say, hey, slow down just a second, and let's count the costs before you get ready to sign on the dotted line and be shackled with a ton of debt, and then try to figure out how do you get an ROI later on down the road. So yeah, a good mentor is going to be able to yeah, see things at 10,000 feet and keep you from crashing into a wall.
Absolutely. Just a reminder for those joining while we're in the midst of the conversation, if you have a question or a comment, feel free to throw it in the chat. Make sure that you have the two set for everyone if you want everyone to see it. Otherwise, it'll go to just myself and Tom. One thing that's outside your business, but is a massive part of your business, is obviously your clients. And with clients come their expectations. Clients have differing levels of interest in their projects. You may have one client that their level of interest is sky high, one is a little more hands off. How do you both, well, two parts. How do you handle the more interested ones from disrupting your standards and your schedule and your system and your workflow? And then how do you kind of keep engaged and make sure you're connecting with those that may not have that massive interest, but you still want to have good communication with? How do you kind of balance the differing levels of interest that you see in different clients?
Yeah, so when it comes to taking care of your clients, you know, what usually will drive most contractors crazy are the high man, what's a polite way to call them? The very needy clients, you know.
Well
So
done.
if
Well done.
let's categorize some of those needy clients. So you've got the needy clients that dangle a lot of money over your head. And I want to encourage everybody that's listening in is you want to have a mindset that you're willing to fire a client even if they pay good money,
Mm,
especially if they end up abusing your team members. Years ago, early on in my journey as a contractor, man, I would have my team members get abused by them, jump
mm,
through crazy hoops, break some of our own systems and processes because, oh, but they pay good money. And I would argue long term, when it comes to building a high performing business, when it comes to scaling your company, you can get more clients, but it's harder for you to get good team members.
mm,
And so nowadays, what I would suggest is have the mindset where the team member having systems and processes that protect the team members from needy clients that may end up abusing them. I mean, they could abuse them through just verbal abuse. I
mm.
had team members that would get chewed out by people, and early on in my journey, I'd say, hey, just, I know they're cussing you out, but they pay good money.
Mm.
Well, you run the risk, like I did, of losing good people on your team because you're chasing after the big bucks. And it's hard to scale a business. You're going to have retaining issues with your team members. So I would first build a really, really strong, solid system and process on, hey, this is how we expect our clients to treat all of our team members. And from the top down, we're willing to let a client go if they're abusing our system. Now, I'm
Yeah.
not advocating for a rigid system where it's
Mhm.
just all black and white. You need to be a little bit flexible. I get that. But man, when you've got those VIP customers that end up maybe just too high maintenance,
Mm.
if I call it a PETA factor, it stands for pain in the ass. When a client's PETA factor starts getting way too high, especially when my team members don't want to go to their house anymore, don't want to deal with them, you really need to take that into account. It's hard to scale a business if your team members know that, oh, Tom's just going to take their money, and I'm just going to have to put up with this baloney.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move over to the employee part of things during the busy season. And Tim's got a question that I want to get to as well. Uh, but let's start here. You are trying to responsibly add people to the team and get them up to speed. How do you do that during the busy season? Because I assume you're going to look at this strategically, like all these other things. It's different when you're busy versus when things are slow. So if you're hiring, managing employees during the busy season and you're talking about adding new teammates and getting them up to speed during that busy season, what advice do you have when you're doing it then versus a little less busy season, shall we say?
Yeah, so when it comes to hiring, I really like the what I call the NFL mindset. And this could be more of just a professional league mindset, but let's just say NFL mindset. And what I mean by that is think of the question you just asked. And if you had an NFL owner and he's thinking about the next 10, 12 games coming up in the main season, is he going to hire them right in the middle of the season? No, no. You're making all these hiring decisions. You're getting all this preparation done in the off season, massive preparation. So just adopt an NFL mindset. Think of your home service business as an NFL team. And if you have a peak season, if your contracting business has a peak season, then you should have been preparing for peak season 6 months before peak season even started.
Mm,
You you should be running numbers. All right, let's look at what we did last year. All right, when was peak demand? How many, if it's an HVAC company, how many technicians did we need when it was max capacity?
mm,
And
mm-hmm,
6 months prior to that, you should be prepping for that.
mm-hmm.
Massive preparation before peak season. Yeah, the last thing we want you to do is when it's game day and you're running the plays on the field to be running around going, "Oh, I don't have a second string. Well, yeah, I guess I need to hire a second." No.
Right.
All you should have had a bench already in advance. You should have a first string, a second string, depending upon your size of your organization. You should have a funnel where you're flowing people in preparation to be from third string to second string, from second string to first string. All that should have been done in the off season, non-peak.
Not in the busy season. I want to get to a couple comments because these are great. Back to the previous point about avoiding some of the PETA customers. Seth Joyce says some of the best jobs you do are the ones you don't do. And then we have a question from Tim Scholes says, and this is back to the employee thing. He asks, how are you implementing accountability when employees that are not perfect but they continue to make mistakes, e.g., dock pay, versus encouragement for following directions, and then you're kind of rewarding that behavior. So I guess his question is, what's the best way to kind of implement accountability versus a harsh route like the dock pay, or are you more encouraging, but is that rewarding the behavior? What will your thoughts be on that?
Yeah, yeah. So what I want to share with them specifically, that this really speaks to me because for many, many years I had some of the problems that this gentleman may be alluding to, and others that are listening in may have alluded to, which is what I called an unbalanced job description.
Hmm.
And a lot of times when you run into performance issues or attitude issues, it's because you have an unbalanced job description. And let me explain what that means. The typical contractor, when they hire somebody, they give them a job description. This is what to do. This is how to do it. But what's missing is the consequences for non-compliance. What I would advocate, what I really want to encourage all the listeners to do is take a fresh look at their job description. And more often than not, what they're going to look at, they're going to go, "Oh, I told them what to do. I told them how to do it. I told them when to do it, but I didn't tell them in advance what the consequences were if they didn't do the what, the when, the how, and the why."
Hmm.
And so when you especially when you have a new team member coming in, that's a perfect opportunity in the onboarding process to say, hey, man, we're going to fully get you up to speed. We're going to teach you the trade. We're going to teach you how to do whatever, X, Y, and Z. Now, the other part we want to make sure we go over is the consequences for non-compliance. And the non-compliance could be, okay, listen, if you don't get this part of the training, then we have this secondary training. Okay. If you're not hitting your numbers out in the field, okay, then in advance, you know that you'll be coming in for special one-on-one training. Okay.
Mhm.
If you didn't hit this metric, then this is going to happen. You're going to see a verbal warning from the CSR. Then after that, if you're still off track, then you're going to probably have something from the service manager. You'll have a verbal warning from the service manager. Then after that, we're going to bring you in, and we're going to have a one-on-one talk in our office, a closed door session. But here's the thing. If they know in advance, John,
Mhm.
if you build the consequences and the flow of pain in the job description, you will see a big, big difference.
Yeah.
Now with your existing employees, you've got to phase that in. You got to go back transparent and say, hey, listen, guys.
That was gonna be my question. If somebody says, "Hey, Tom, great point. I'm gonna do that going forward." What if I haven't already done that? Now, what do I do with the current team?
Yeah. And a real good leader, hopefully a real good leader is sharing the mistakes that they're making on their journey. And so,
Mm.
you bring everybody into a company meeting and say, hey guys, I just want to let you know we're going to be updating our job descriptions, moving into Q4. In Q4, we're going to give everybody updated job descriptions. We found some pros and cons of the current job descriptions, the way they're laid out. We're going to be adding more clarity. We're going to revisit them. Everybody's going to get a little refresher. And through a really effective launch plan of phasing in the better changes of accountability and consequences, then you say, all right, guys, here's the current version. It's good. We're going to go live in Q4. Here's the current version. You just want to let you know we added this section. Let's go over this section. And so that gives the existing team, oh, okay. I didn't know that. So that's in there now? Yes, yes. Now, depending upon the size of your organization, John, what that'll really do is that'll help your managers manage everyone consistently.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have that in your job description, then you're probably doing what I did early on. It is just reactionary management. Man, they're not hitting my numbers. What do I do?
Mm.
I'm going to go over there and yell at them.
Mm.
Okay, now what? I'll yell at them some more. And then you may have a manager that manages consequences in a completely different style. You
Mm.
want to avoid that. The scale of business, consistent job descriptions, including the consequences built in.
One of the things we were going to talk about is keeping the current employees engaged. Does that go right there with setting the job description? I mean, not whole house solution is keeping employees engaged because there's different things that can occur over the lifetime of them working at a particular company. But my question is part of keeping employees super engaged on the mission of the company and what you're doing and the standards you've set, is a lot of that set foundationally in the beginning with that job description? And then what parts would you give advice on throughout, like you said, the existing team? If you haven't already done it, how do you keep employees super engaged to what you guys are doing as a business?
Yeah, engagement is tricky if you don't understand all the dynamics to get a highly engaged team. Uh, One of the things the listeners may want to do is check out a book called First Break All the Rules. I don't remember off the top of my head who wrote the book, but there's a book called First Break All the Rules. But basically, what it does is it identifies high performing organizations that are engaged. They have
Hmm.
engaged team members. Out of that came a survey. And if you want to see to what degree your team members are not engaged, there is a 12-question survey that you can send anonymously to your team, and it's going to let you know in what areas are they not engaged. One of the things I see time and time again, when an owner is pulling their hair out because their guys aren't doing what they should be doing, or they're just you know, putting in 40 hours but not really delivering the results they should be delivering, or they're milking the clock, or they have a bad attitude. What's interesting on a really effective surveying tool is one of those 12 questions will pull out what's probably driving them crazy about your organization. For example, on that 12 question survey, it'll help identify if you're giving preferential treatment to one person versus another.
Hmm.
And you can cause disengagement if they see differential treatment taking place. That's not fair. That's not good. And again, the bigger your organization gets, the harder it is to be very, very consistent on how you're treating your people. So, oftentimes you have somebody that says, well, I don't even have the tools that I need to get the job done. And so, they half-ass stuff because, hey, if my boss doesn't care to make sure I've got what I need, then I'm just gonna, I'll do whatever, I'll
Hmm.
run at half speed. you know Take a vehicle for example. It's not uncommon that, if I'm visiting, a contractor's shop, they may have one truck over here is in great shape, but another truck that somebody else is driving is a piece of junk. The AC
Hmm.
hasn't been fixed in who knows how many months. It's got a cracked windshield. you know so these vehicles that are often their home away from home, man, if you're not taking good care of them, they're going to respond in kind. They're going to be like, this guy doesn't care about the vehicle that I'm driving. I got a bald tire over here, and he's telling me to go another 5,000 miles on that bald tire. What the heck, man?
Yeah.
Now here's the thing. I did a lot of those things, John, early on in my journey.
Yeah.
And then with coaching and learning and all this kind of stuff, I had mentors saying, man, if you want people to kill it for you, you got to kill it for them. You got
Sure.
to bring it. You got to
Yeah.
deliver. Uh, so if you got people that are unengaged, a lot of times the fingers that you're pointing at them, you got four fingers pointing at you on some areas that you probably didn't need to work on.
Right. And I always say, the people who have watched the monthly webinars have heard me say this, but I love, and I've said this on the podcast, you have to, it's from one of our friends in Texas down in Austin, but he said, to make good barbecue, you got to make bad barbecue. You've got to go through it to really learn some of this stuff. Where if you didn't have a mentor or a coach to help you before you make that mistake, it's just as important. All right, different type of relationship. What are your tips when you're not working with an employee, but you're working with subcontractors? What tips do you have that you've learned along the way and that you've seen? And what advice would you offer for having good working relationships with subcontractors?
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head, and just that, and you want to have good relationships. So what does that look
Yeah.
like? You want to make sure it's a win-win proposition. So you want to make sure you've balanced that equation. They're winning and you're winning, And so if you want subcontractors that can't wait to do your job, you probably need to make sure you're paying them well. Don't take
Mhm.
pride in saying, I'm using that subcontractor because he's dirt cheap. I'm That's lose win. You're winning, they're losing. So the most effective subcontract relationships that I've had, I make sure, hey, you good? Am I taking care of you good? Yeah, you good? Yeah, oh, yeah. And they would say, Tom, you call me anytime, man. I'll put another job off to get your job. All right, that's a good relationship. That's what you want to hear. Okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
Then if you're using subcontractors, you want to periodically spot check them every now and again. If they're going out to your customer's house, you want to show up when they're unannounced and see what kind of vehicle are they showing up on.
Mhm.
Are they showing up to your customer's house and they open up the door and all these cigarette butts fall out, and they're chain smoking all the way up to the customer's door? What do they look like? uh, so spot check them every night. Keep honest people honest. Make sure that they're delivering your consistent image through them as a subcontractor, to the best of their ability. They may
Sure.
not have your pretty uniforms, but You want to spot check them, just show up on a job every now and again and make sure that they're representing you well. And then finally, make sure they've got insurance that cover your butt.
Yeah.
Make sure they've got their insurance showing you as additionally insured, because in the worst case, when they damage your customer's property, or if there's a car wreck, you want to make sure that you're covered. So
Yeah.
you want to make sure that box is checked off.
Wade Wells brings up an interesting question in the chat about subcontractors. Said, do you ever share subcontractors with well-related competition? And if so, why? And if not, why not? So that's an interesting question. Sharing subcontractors with well-related competition, why or why not?
I'm a big fan of helping your competitors out if you're a high performing contractor. If you're a high performing contractor and your pricing is right and your net profit is right and you got good team members, there's plenty of business to go around. Help your competitors get a little bit better and their prices will go up. Years ago, I had a scarcity mentality. It was the exact opposite. Years ago, I was trying to figure out, how do I sabotage my competitors? How do I
Mm-hmm.
hurt them? How do I keep them from learning some of the things that I'm doing? And day in, day out, what did I see happening? I would be priced here. They would be priced here.
Mm.
Instead, I changed my mindset. I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
listen, I'm going to bump into them over at Jack in the Box and I'm going to say, hey, listen, man, I just wanted to meet you. There's plenty of business to go around. You start developing a relationship and you'd be surprised at how beneficial it can be both ways. All of a
Yeah.
sudden, they'll say, hey, listen, I just fired this dude because he did X, Y, and Z. I just want to give you heads up in case he comes knock on your door. Guess what? That's priceless information. But you can't do that if you have an antagonistic relationship with your competitors. So,
Mm.
if you've got high performing subcontractors that are loyal to you and they're going to take really good care of you, and then you find out that they have excess capacity where they could use a little bit more money when you're not keeping them busy, yeah, there's plenty of business to go around. You can share that. But first, get your house in order, get your mindset in order, and then, yeah, help your competitors.
Yeah, absolutely. Tim, who's asking about the employee expectations and which way to go and not rewarding bad behavior. He just had a follow up. He said, so if an employee damages a piece of equipment, say for negligence, what is kind of recommended accountability? Is it the side of more training or going the other direction with like time off with no pay after you've already delivered verbal and kind of written warnings? What would you say in a scenario like that if you haven't set that expectation, but hey, you're catching up, you've learned from your mistakes, but you do have an employee that say damages that piece of equipment before you've got this new job description kind of written up? What route do you recommend somebody going in that scenario?
Yeah, John, that's a good question, and I really wish there was a hard and fast rule, and
Yeah.
that's the burden of the leader. The leader has to take all the context in mind.
Mm,
Was this the first of one specific situation, or was this the fourth time of the same situation? It's going to be a different decision that you arrive in. Most of the time, if it's a first time, I would suggest you give them grace and you use this as a learning moment. Uh, for goodness sakes, most owners that are on this call, if we were to sit down and have a drink and talk about all the mistakes they made as
mm,
they were an owner on their journey,
mhm.
they probably would have been fired themselves. They would have fired themselves.
Yeah.
Hey, you know, I you know, I would tell my team members in my HVAC company, you'll never cost the company as much as I've cost the company. You'll never
Yeah.
cost them as much. I have made the most mistakes, either a car wreck myself or a bad business decision that cost thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And so when you think about your own mistakes and how much that's cost the company as an owner, that may make you a little bit more gracious. So for your typical team member, I would suggest you say, hey, first one is on me. Second one is on you, you know, and you're just going to have to weigh, what was the impact? If it was gross negligence, if it was malicious intent, man, that's cut and dry.
Yeah.
If it was you clearly did something negligent, boom, they got to go. They got
Mm.
to go. If it was malicious, they got to go. you know. But if it was an honest mistake, or you look back and it was due to lack of training, stuff like that, then you gotta extend them some grace.
Sure. Let's get into measuring success. What are your tips for implementing new systems, new workflows, new ways of doing things?
Well, no particular order. What I would say is one, take 2 to 3 times more time implementing something than you currently do.
Mm.
You know, from our hundreds and hundreds of contractors that we take care of in our organization, when we jump in and we start helping them with their company, more often than not, whatever were getting ready to implement, or if they brought us in to implement something, their timeline of implementation was too short.
Mm.
Was too short. You know, one common thing that a lot of home service companies do as they're building their company is they modify their team members' pay. So it's not uncommon early on in a contractor's journey. Maybe they were hourly, and then they're looking at some type of bonus program, implementing that, or they're maybe going from hourly to performance-based pay. Uh, and so keep this in mind. Stephen Covey says that when it comes to people, slow is fast and fast is slow. And what he meant by that is when you're making changes in your organization that impact people, go slow. You want to take your time in launching whatever the change is going to be. So, one of the things you want to do is if you're planning on making a change, write out on paper what the launch plan is. Okay. This is step one. Step one, we're going to let them know change is coming. If you look at the composition of your team members, most of your team members, if you look at in terms of behavioral sciences, most of your team members on their temperament, if you're familiar with DISC, D-I-S and C, most of your team members' temperaments that are going to build your company don't like change,
Mm.
or what they want is maximum time to adjust to a future change. So if they've been doing something a certain way, and you have an owner that comes back from this podcast, or they come from a conference like I used to do, hey, I got this bright idea. Well, it's great in your mind, but you got to map out an implementation plan. And so just some examples is you want to bring them in and say, hey man, I've been thinking about this, making this change sometime in the future. Just want to get you heads up. And then next month you say, hey, I've been working on that change I was talking about a month ago. Okay. Now I've got a roadmap to that. Does anybody want to join me in kind of helping me build out? I kind of got a rough idea. Anybody want to help me with finalizing what this is going to look like? Doing that in the implementation process brings in your next layer of influencers within your company.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So you already have a game plan of what you want to implement. You've got the guardrails, but you want to bring in the team leaders, depending upon your organization. They could be a team leader, they could be a manager, or they could be an influential team member that doesn't have a title, but they're influential. Bring them into the process because they're the ones that are going to be talking to the people in the hallway. They're the ones that are going to be talking to the people in the break room, out in the parking lot. Hey, Tom's thinking about this, and man, I've been working with him on this idea, and I gave him some feedback, and we're making these. All that is going to help the launch go much, much more effective. And then once you get the rough draft figured out, you share the rough draft with the team. All right, this is what we came up with so far. Let's pick it apart. Give the people an opportunity to kind of, well, I don't, yeah, well, what about this? If you, again, the next series of buy-in is what that's going to do is it's going to keep that from happening in the hallways. It's going to keep the cancers from growing on something that you're getting ready to launch, because you'll always be excited about it. You'll always think it's a great idea, but you want to get maximum buy-in, and you want to keep the cancerous conversations to a bare minimum, bare minimum. And then, so you have them pick apart your rough draft. Then you say, okay, guys, we're going to launch. We're going to launch at this time. Ideally, what you want to do is somehow make it fun. If you can gamify a launch, I think of yard signs. There's a lot of home service contractors out there that, come back or read something that are like, man, I need to start putting yard signs out. Follow the similar process. Take time, help them, show, hey, what do you think of this design? Get some buy-in. Okay, this is the process on how we're going to put the yard signs out. Here's the consequences if you don't put the yard signs out. Going back to what we talked about earlier. Okay, guys, get ready. On October 1st, you got 90 days. I'm just letting you know, on October 1st, we're going to start putting out yard signs no matter what. And we're going to have a contest. And if you put out blah, blah, you send a picture and you put it in the Service Fusion software or whatever your dispatching is, take a picture, put it in, if you have a Slack channel or you have a group me or whatever, put the pictures in there. We're going to have fun. So build in a little bit of gamification or fun as you launch whatever you're going to implement. So I kind of went on back to you, John. I got
I
excited.
love it.
I got excited on that
No,
one.
I love it. I love it because I do think I I've worked in a variety of different places where a system could be a new piece of software that both your customers and your employees have to use, and content management systems, and obviously working at CompanyCam, same thing. And the amount of times I've talked to people about change, and with change, new process, new software, new ways of doing things. And so I love you're passionate about it, which is a great dovetail to kind of the last thing I want to talk about, and that we hear all the time, and that is goals. Everybody has a thought process on establishing goals, whether it's high level company goals, goals for your employees, goals for your teams, goals for the crews, goals for individuals, office, in the field. When you think about this broad, and you and I could probably talk an hour about how to set goals and what goals should look like, especially in the service or home business. But when you are coaching or talking or thinking about goals specifically in the trades, what is your advice to those that own a business or are running a business when you think about setting goals that are most effective?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, the leader of any home service business needs to be setting the biggest goals. So your team is going to rally around whatever your vision is. And usually your vision of how you picture your company, the way you picture your company in the future, that vision, you're going to have goals on helping achieve that vision. Now, depending upon where you're at on your journey, you may have to work on coming up with the vision.
Mm.
Okay. That's very, very, very common, but you've got to have it. And again, circling all the way back to having a coach and mentor, they can help you with that. What is an inspiring vision for your team that they can rally behind, that they can kill for? And what major goals do you want to achieve in order for them to participate in your vision? So you want to make sure it's big, big, big goal, big enough to fill all their little goals within it. Now, you want to crystallize the business goals first. And I would argue, don't talk about your personal goals until much later, and you may just want to have that as private conversations. And here's why I say that. It's not uncommon that you have a business owner say, man, I want to build this business because I've got this big boat that I want to buy for me. Or look at this awesome house I have. This business built this awesome house, and I want an even bigger house. And so you got to be real careful that you don't talk about your personal goals and what their hard work is going to achieve for you personally.
Yeah.
Ideally, you want it to be a business goal that naturally feeds into what's in it for them,
Mm,
because that's their perspective. Why am
mm,
I showing up every
mm,
day for you? What are
mhm.
you doing for me? It's just human nature. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
what the generation is, it's human nature. And so if you say, hey, listen, this is the goals. If we can build the company to 10 million or whatever the number is, then it will provide these benefits for all of us. Oh, okay. All right. How do we do that?
Mhm.
That's kind of a little rough draft of the way that would look. And then what you
Yeah.
want to do is just keep talking about the goals. Keep talking about the goals. The simpler, the better. The simpler, the better. When I was sitting down with my managers and we were mapping out, uh, let's just use this year, for example. Let's say we were mapping out what the goals are to achieve in 2025. You as managers and owners, you can get wrapped up in all these goals that you want to achieve. And the big goal could have many goals. Okay, I want to hit this KPI, but in order to hit this KPI, I'm going to have to hit all these other little KPIs, these other little goals in order to hit it. If you
Mhm.
can, keep it really, really, really simple. Okay, that's what if it's okay, we want to hit this revenue goal in 2025. Okay, maybe it just comes down to how many calls do we need? If we have this many calls that come in on average per day, we already know we're going to book at this booking rate and it's going to end up with this average ticket. So we'll make the goal for 2025. We just need X number of calls a day. And that's the focus. And we just rally to X number of calls per day. You know, for
Yeah.
another company, it could be leads per day. You know, it could be,
Sure.
just simply average ticket per day. Hey, listen, guys, if you focus on this and get this, we're going to hit our big goal. And here's all the benefits we're going to derive from that. Yeah. So that goes back to the, less is more in terms of goal setting.
Sure. Uh, what if anybody has any last minute questions? I urge you to throw them in the chat. Glenn does have one for you here. Before we wrap up, he says, "Where is a good place to start a search for a coach or a mentor?"
Good question. So depending upon your trade, there's usually a local trade association. And so go to that local trade association. Okay. And what you're going to look for is you're going to look for the biggest company that's there.
Hmm.
And they're probably going to be a competitor. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your hat off and you're going to walk up to them with your hat in your hand and you're going to say, hey, listen, man, you got such a great company. I've heard a lot of good things about you. And you develop a relationship with them. And then from the relationship, maybe you say, you have lunches and then you say, hey, you know, I have this problem. Can you help me with this problem? And the right mentor, it'll just happen. They'll be like, hey, let me take you underneath my wing. Come on, John, come here. Let me help you out.
Boy, do I need a mentor.
Yeah. You can rinse and repeat the same formula. If there's not a local trade association, okay, you go to Chamber of Commerce. You
Yep.
go to the Chamber of Commerce and you just start looking for a highly successful home service contractor. They don't need to be in the same trade because so much of the wisdom and the benefits to running a business goes across all trades.
Sure.
Hiring best practices, leadership best practices, financial best practices. So you go to the Chamber of Commerce and you're like, hey, that I've heard about that roofer. That guy's got like 200 employees. And you take your hat off and you walk up to them with humility and you just say, "Man, I've heard a lot of cool things about you. You know, can I ask you a question?" And you see, does this owner have the spirit of service, the spirit of coaching and training in them? And they may, and they may. You can do the same thing at a conference. You know, if you got a conference in your trade, and it doesn't have to be trade related. It could, you know, there's conferences happening all the time. We've got a great
Sure.
conference coming in October. You go to those conferences and you look for the big dog
Yeah.
and you make friends with the big dog and they, you know, I would suggest that route, John, as
Hmm.
opposed to getting online and just searching different people's websites and stuff like that. That could be a shot in the dark. You know, you never know what you're going to get there.
Sure. Servicenation.com is the website. Our guest today, Tom Peregrino. I can't thank you enough. And let's talk about that real quick before we wrap up today. 2024 Service World Expo, October 15th through the 17th in Orlando. I'm a big trade show expo guy. It's when I jumped into this side of the business from doing something different, it's all software, but getting into the trades, I wanted to make those relationships and talk about a great place to do it. Like, it is awesome to meet people of different walks of life, got into the trades for different reasons, have different experiences. Let's talk about the 2024 Service World Expo real quick in Orlando coming up in October.
Yeah, I appreciate that, John. Yeah, it's Service World Expo is a conference for anybody in the home service business. So, regardless of your trade, you know, you're going to get great content. You're going to get great education. There's some great partying that's going to take place because it's inside the Disney complex.
Yeah.
So there's some cool after parties, all that kind of stuff. There's all these vendors you can go visit with if you want to. But my big thing that I love, and this is what they're experiencing here with us, John, this hour, is you connect with other contractors.
Yeah.
So do not come to Service World if you're not going to connect with contractors, because it's the other contractors that can give you so much wisdom that you bump
Yeah.
into in the hall that you're sitting with at the table eating a meal, and you just start picking their brains, and then you share contact information and then you start networking and going from there. So yeah, tons of content, man. We're hitting AI real hard in October. We're talking about leadership, all different financial stuff. So it doesn't matter what the trade is. There's something for everybody, and it's all home service contractors. So there's tons of people that you can connect with.
That's fantastic. Don't forget, listen to the Good Contractor podcast brought to you by CompanyCam. It's on YouTube and Spotify and Apple and wherever you get your podcasts. But most importantly, I just want to thank Tom Peregrino, president, president of Service Nation. And it's been awesome talking with you today, Tom. Fantastic stuff. And hopefully talk to you again very soon.
Thank you, John. It's always good hanging out with you and hanging out with other contractors because I'm a contractor at heart myself.
Absolutely. Have a good day. We'll talk to everybody soon.